Northern Hemisphere solved. We've got all 7 pieces in one half of the puzzle all lined up, and it's time to turn our attention to the other half. And here we're going to finish the remaining triangles. Here's the good news. All the triangles are in the right place. So the triangle pieces, I've got one at what we'll call the South Pole. And I've got 3 around it. Here's one, here's a second one, and here's a third one. Again, these pieces are all in the right position relative to one another and relative to the South Pole. I don't need to move any of the pieces around. I may need to change the rotations of the pieces that are on the equator, if you will. Sticking with my celestial references, thinking about this as the Northern Hemisphere. So here's the Southern Hemisphere I'm rotating, and it's moving around the equator. Here's a triangle piece touching the equator, a triangle piece touching the equator, triangle piece touching the equator. I don't need to change the position of any of the triangle pieces. I just need to change the rotations. Okay, I've only got 2 sequences that I'm going to use for this, and really in this whole video. The trick isn't the sequences themselves, though they're a little chunky and unintuitive. They both run out for 8 moves. They're not super easy to remember, but there's only 2 of them, and so it's a matter of knowing when to use them. I may need to use them 0 times or once or twice total. So in this whole video, you'll come out of it doing everything you need to do in a maximum of 16 moves. So it's a matter of analyzing the position of the puzzle and determining what moves need to be made. So I'm going to put those 2 sequences up on the screen right now, and there you see them. I'm just going to call them Sequence 1 and Sequence 2. And each one of them is going to have a little parenthetical reference on it, one called CL and one called CR. And I'll explain what those mean in a minute, or in several minutes when we get to it. But those are our 2 sequences. And, like I say, we'll use, most commonly you'll have to use one of them. Sometimes you have to use them both or use one twice, but you never have to use more than 2, and sometimes you get away without having to use any. Anyway, let's talk about a couple of pieces that are on the equator. This one, I don't need to worry about it. I can worry about the other 2 pieces, and this one will take care of itself. I find the other 2 pieces easier to work with. I'm going to call the other 2 pieces the triangle. Remember our triangle with the crooked corner, or with the clipped corner, the one that I said was not piece 3? Well, it's not piece 3, but here it is, and it's going to help us, and that clipped corner is going to help us. So I call this the triangle. I call this piece the crooked triangle. This piece is technically a pentagon. It's technically a pentagon. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. But it's got this triangular appearance to it. It generally describes a triangle. And so it's the crooked triangle. It's got 2 straight sides and 1 crooked side. Here's how we evaluate these 2. With the crooked triangle, the crooked side needs to be on the equator. So this one is good. If the crooked side were here, then this piece would need a clockwise rotation to get right. If the crooked side were here, then this piece would need a counterclockwise rotation to get right. Look at your puzzle. Look at your crooked triangle. Which way does it need to get rotated to get right? Make a note of it. Come back to the triangle. 3 sides, clipped corner over here. The clipped corner needs to point at the South Pole. the clipped corner needs to be here. So in my case, the triangle piece needs to be rotated counterclockwise. Take a look at yours. Which way does it need to be rotated? I mentioned way earlier in the presentation that if you couldn't see the clipped corner, or if it wasn't, if your eyesight wasn't good, or if the white was kind of worn off of the edges and you're having trouble making this out, what that means in this case is the short side of the triangle should be over here. So that's another way to get it if you can't really spot this clipped corner. In my case, I need to rotate counterclockwise to get that lined up. All right, you got it? This one needs to rotate counterclockwise. The triangle needs to rotate counterclockwise. And over here, this one is good. Now I'm going to consult this chart. All right, based on what I see on that chart, I'm going to rotate my puzzle back to position 1. I'm going to go back to the northern hemisphere and go back to position 1 and do whichever one of those sequences is appropriate under the circumstances. In this case, because the crooked triangle is good, and because the triangle needs to be rotated counterclockwise, what I'm going to do is come back to position 1. I'm going to set the triangle under piece number 1, and I'm going to execute sequence 1. Sequence 1 goes like this: R prime, B prime, T, B, R, T, D prime, T prime. All right, my northern hemisphere is still solved, and now I flip over and look at my triangle pieces in the southern hemisphere. All right, triangle with a clipped corner. Clipped corner points toward the North Pole. Crooked triangle, the broken edge, the crooked edge is on the equator, so that's good. If those two are right, then the third piece has to be right, and I don't have to worry about it. Now, on that first chart, if it had turned out that both of these two pieces needed to be turned clockwise, or that both needed to be turned counterclockwise, then after doing that first sequence, I would have to come back here and check again. That's the situation where you have to do this twice. If both needed to go clockwise or if both needed to go counterclockwise, I would do one of those two sequences, scramble things up, come back and check again. But in this case, I am done. And so, once again, I'll show that chart once again. And those are the moves. Why did I not worry about this piece? Well, this piece is a function of what's going on the other two. These two, I think, are just easier to visually identify when they're in the right position. And so I check these two to figure out what needs to be done. All right, I mentioned there's that shorthand, that abbreviation, that CL or that CR. I want to tell you what those mean, and this is the way that I remember it. When I check these two pieces, I say, well, if one needs to rotate counterclockwise and one needs to rotate clockwise, Or if one needs to rotate counterclockwise and the other one is good. The idea with either sequence 1 or sequence 2 is what I always want to do is put whatever piece needs to be rotated counterclockwise under piece 1 before I start. And so there's going to be one piece that needs to be rotated clockwise. And so that's either over here on the right, and that's that CR, or it's over here on the left, and that's where I use that CL. So rather than, when I work this out, thinking of this big chart to say which one of these things I need to do, I say, well, I find the piece that needs to be rotated counterclockwise and put it below piece 1. I take whichever piece needs to be rotated clockwise. I say if it's over here, I'll use sequence 2. If it's over here, I'll use sequence 1. And when you're identifying which of these pieces needs to be rotated clockwise, well, in a case like what I had, where this needed to be rotated counterclockwise, and this one was already good, I say, well, the other one must be the one that needed to be rotated counterclockwise. Remember the quid pro quo. Remember, it's never just one piece, it's two. So if I've got one piece that needs to rotate and another one that's good, then this one, even if I haven't picked up on the visual cues, must be the other one. This must be the other one that needs to rotate. So perhaps you can make sense out of all of that, and perhaps you can't. But that's there. That's a shortcut for you if you like, and that's the way I remember it. You know, I'm going to find out which one needs to go clockwise, which one needs to go counterclockwise. I get the one that needs to go counterclockwise, put it under piece number 1. And then there's a piece that needs to rotate clockwise. If it's over here, I use sequence 2. And if it's over here, I use sequence 1. So maybe that'll help you. Or perhaps you go back to the chart. Again, you may have to do this twice. If you do this evaluation of these two triangles and you find they both need to rotate clockwise, or if you find that you both need to rotate counterclockwise, then it doesn't matter. I come back to piece 1 and I'll just do either one of these sequences, scramble it up, and come back and evaluate again. But on the second time, you'll get it. So anyway, this leaves us in a position where we are ready to solve. And I am going to end this video, and I'm not going to touch this cube. When part 5 starts up, it's going to be sitting right there. That is exactly what you're looking at, and we will pick it up from there. That's a good position to show everything that we have left to do. So I will go ahead and wrap this video up here. As always, anything not clear, anything not making sense, do leave a comment, and feel free to like and subscribe, and we will see you for part 5 where we will wrap it up.